The great Eagles insider, the man himself, EJ Smith.
Ooh, I forgot I was going to take my jacket off for the hit. So, yeah, now I was in my head about the fashion faux
Do the
pas.
pants instead.
Wait a minute, it's cold outside. Keep
Bo
your
Allen
jacket on.
style. I'll be all right. You know, it's good for you.
Oh, you look good. You look great, EJ. Let's send it over to EJ's notebook.
All right, so first and foremost, I know the big topic of discussion after this game is going to be Nick Sirianni's decision to rest the starters. Obviously, it did backfire. The result backfired on them here, with the Bears losing and the Eagles really not being able to grasp the number 2 seed, even though, again, it was within grasp for them. Nick Sirianni said after the game that he's going to stick with his process. He kept harping on the fact that the majority of the Eagles starters will be able to go into the postseason healthy. And that was the priority for them going into this week, getting these guys a rest, like paring it down in practice and then obviously in this game. So Nick Sirianni really stuck with, again, that decision, talking about the process, not the result necessarily. And the secondly, I think, talking to players, they really backed up what Nick Sirianni had to say there. Devontae Smith, I thought, put it best when he said, we don't care what the path is. They don't care about the fact that they're the number 3 seed instead of the number 2 seed. Obviously, they would have had a more favorable situation as a number 2 seed, both in the wild card matchup and then the potential to host a playoff game or, to have the NFC run through their stadium. So a big missed opportunity. But again, the players really harped on the importance of getting rest and not caring about the result here that happened today in terms of the seeding. And then lastly, just some quick 49ers reaction. Being in the Eagles locker room, you saw guys finding out in real time. Some of them were asking us who they were going to play in the playoffs. And, the initial reaction is that they're going to have to stop and account for Christian McCaffrey and the 49ers run game. It's crazy to think that the Eagles and 49ers kind of haven't played each other, since Dre Greenlaw and Big Dom had their dust up 2 years ago. So, it should be an interesting matchup. I kind of agree with you guys that I think that this wasn't the worst case scenario for the Eagles. I think that they should be favored in that game. But, definitely the initial reaction is about the 49ers' talent on offense and their run game in particular.
Yeah, almost the worst fallback domino here would be if the Bears lose to the Packers, and that then sends the Rams to the link in the second round. But even then, that was a possible first-round matchup. If you can't win that game in the second round at home, so be it.
Yeah, no, listen, I do think that the 2 seed, I think it is significant. I'm not trying to hand wave it. But at the same time, I understand that the result backfired on them, but I still understand the decision that they made. And, I'm not the type. It's funny. I was talking to another reporter about this, and they said, well, the Eagles made a bad draft pick. Would you evaluate it, based off the process or the result? And I'd say, honestly, I usually would evaluate it off the process.
Yes.
And this is the same thing where I understood the decision that they made to rest the starters. I think the Eagles players were really in favor of it, at the very least. Maybe not pushing for it, but I think a lot of guys saw the benefit of it. So I think that while it was it hung in the balance all night, and I understand why fans are frustrated, I still do get why the Eagles made the choice that they did to kind of let guys reset before the postseason starts.
Yeah, and in a way, blaming the decision to rest the starters takes the coaching staff off the hook for putting a bad game plan together. Go out and win the game with the guys you have.
Yeah, that's what stood out to me. We spent a lot of time before this game talking about, how telling it was going to be how the Eagles approached this game offensively. And, a lot of the same things that really plagued them throughout the season were apparent today. Obviously it looked a little bit different. I was curious from you guys, but I don't know if you've looked it up yet, the under center number that kind of felt anecdotally like they ran a little bit more under center, but overall, it seemed like there were miscommunications in the pass game on some of the concepts, and just kind of an inconsistent, unreliable run game, and really just they've not been a success rate team all year, and they really weren't today either. And then I guess it's also not all that surprising that up front they weren't able to really get consistent play from those guys. Obviously they had injuries, but again, these are all things that have really been a factor all season. It's not like the flip switched with Tanner McKee. I know that that sounds a little silly, but we have seen examples of the Eagles offense looking significantly different with McKee in that limited sample size. So I thought the fact that it looked a lot the same, I mean, it really was kind of reinforcing a lot of the concerns that people are going to have going into the playoffs about this Eagles offense.
So this is early. These sometimes change on True Media, but right after the game, it actually has it as under center at only 22.5%, which is just below their season average, and would be like below the median. So that was a little bit lower, but the play action numbers were that was obvious. It looks like it was the second highest play action they've had in a game this season.
From under center or just in general?
Total. Under center and shotgun.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I've been telling you guys last couple of weeks, I think that the coaching staff is really bullish on this play action game. Again, I do think that this is, even though it didn't look a whole lot different, I think that this was like a truth serum game for the coaching staff, because when you have Tanner McKee in there, he's really going to be comfortable with most concepts that they want to run. And he doesn't have as much maybe carte blanche to say, I don't want this concept in the plan this week. So I think that we saw like what the Eagles coaching staff wants it to look like. And I think it's up to debate whether or not that's a good thing or not.
Who else did you talk to in the locker room, EJ? What did you learn?
Yeah, so we heard from, actually, really quick, I wanted to note this. We heard from Tanner McKee. I asked him about the route concepts on his interception. He said that it wasn't a miscommunication or, a mix-up on the routes. He said that it was basically him trying to do too much. He said he was trying to get too much back in one play. He knew the coverage, he knew the call, and he just made a bad decision. So that one surprised me because it's a pretty uncharacteristic thing from Tanner McKee to see him do that. But no, I mean, we heard from Devontae Smith after the game. Like I said earlier, he said they don't care what the path is. I think he harped on the importance of staying healthy and being able to go into this postseason run healthy. I don't know if it really needs explaining, but he said that the 1,000 yards was significant for him for the reason it is for everybody. He said it's a number that a lot of receivers obviously value, and he appreciated that he got the chance to get that before being out the game there in the first quarter.
Any feedback or discussion of sort of the flag show that the secondary put on display?
So I do not believe Keely Ringo spoke. I don't know if Jacorian Bennett did, because I left for Tanner, and then I left and I stayed for Nick. Tanner went more quickly than Jalen usually does, so I didn't get to hang around. But I do think that is like the very acute. You feel it very acutely, the decision to rest the starters, when you think about the fact that Jacorian Bennett had 2 pass interference penalties in the end zone. Basically gives Washington 14 points there, and obviously Keely Ringo just had a really, really tough game. It feels like this year, like Keely Ringo, it feels almost like it's just gotten progressively worse and worse for him.
Yeah.
Like in training camp, you could he had good days and bad days, and now it's just like it seems like he's just devoid of confidence, and it's sad, because I know that he's a player who would really thrive if he could figure out some of this technique stuff and some of this confidence stuff. So, but again, the fact that it's like that those two, like the way that they played, I mean, you really can like tangibly feel the effect of starting the backups in this game because of the play you got at cornerback. If you just told me, even if you told me that Dory Jackson was out there today, they probably win that game. So I think the fact that those two specifically, had such a big impact, I really do. I feel like, again, it really does put that decision in the forefront. Well,
let me read you some snap counts, EJ, and you tell me what jumps out to you about another thing that could have changed the outcome of this game. Defense, 63, all 63 for Sidney Brown, Jacorian Bennett, Keely Ringo, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who I did think had a pretty nice game. 60 for Michael Carter Jr. Now we're going to get into some players who are going to have to actually play in the playoffs. 56 for Jahad Campbell, 49 for Byron Young, 46 for Ty Robinson, that's fine. 37 for Josh Uche, that's fine. 33 for Moro Ojimo, 32 for Jalex Hunt, 31 for Jordan Davis, 31 for Nolan Smith, 26 for Brandon Graham, and on offense, 2 snaps for A.J. Dillon. 2!
That one jumps out. It does jump out. It's like if you're going to rest the starters, you should have a defensive lineman. Nick talked a lot about that actually during the press conference. Like, the defensive linemen, they played a good amount because that's just kind of the nature of the position, is that, you're going to have to play your guys, and you can only rotate that so much. But you're right. I mean, if you're going to make it a Tank Bigsby game, you could have had a defensive lineman in place of A.J. Dillon. So, no, I mean, because when you're reading out the snap counts, I'm like, well, they played a lot of the guys up front. Like, could they have just played one of Adoree Jackson? Or, I mean, I don't think you play Quinyon Mitchell in this game. And honestly, even saying that, like, if Adoree Jackson gets hurt,
no, yeah, I think you actually saw why they couldn't afford to play Adoree Jackson in this game.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. But yeah, no, it did feel more like a half measure on defense because they did play so many of the guys up front. And to your point, yeah, it was a waste of a roster spot. Not to be rude or not to be callous here, but I think if you're only going to play AJ Dillon 2 snaps, I don't understand why he has the roster spot for a game like this.
So, EJ, last year's path, as you talk about the path, was totally different. #1 seed. They were hot going in. And this year, they win these last 3 in a row before today. And you were around them during the week and tonight saying how they feel. Do you see any similarities to as far as confidence-wise? And I know they beat up on the Raiders and they beat up on Washington in Washington. But getting those 3 wins after having that tough losing streak, do you see it all coming back to them, at least as we get ready for the first playoff game?
Yeah, on defense, absolutely. It feels a lot like last year where they really started to play their best ball in the second half, and there's a swagger and a confidence from that group. Offensively, it feels similar to last year in that they have not played well going into the playoffs, and I think that there's still at least an outward confidence that they express about their ability to turn this around offensively. Devontae said that it's, once they get in the playoffs, he does have confidence because there's no time for mistakes. It's win or go home, and the urgency will be there for that group. I would argue the urgency has been there for them most of the season because, they've talked a lot about some of these issues that they've had. So, I mean, they've done it before offensively. It hasn't quite been this drastic. They were more productive and more efficient last year, even though it didn't look great at times. But I do think that you've seen the formula. I wrote earlier this week about the Eagles offense needs to be like a moment's offense in the playoffs. They have enough talent where I think they can pull that off. I think that they can string together drives in tight games against good teams still, because you look across the lineup and you think, okay, these guys can make plays. But at the same time, like consistency, reliability, like those have not been words you'd associate with the Eagles offense. And I think that it is similar to last year, but maybe not in the way that people would think because of, the fact that they kind of put it together in the postseason really did color the way that we view that group. So they didn't really have that like Steelers game, I guess, from last year where it's like, so that's what y'all wanted to see, huh? But again, I think it'll only take one game in the playoffs for them to really be able to put something together offensively.
All right, DJ, what are you going to be writing about for the diehards to read on allphly.com?
I'm going to do some quick fire takeaways, what we learned, if anything, from this game. We'll unpack Nick Sirianni's decision. But again, I think there were some slight things that we talked about here today. That I do think the game was educational at certain times. I'll be honest with you guys. I did not expect to be at the gun, writing my quick takeaways. I thought I'd have that bad boy filed by the midway through the third quarter. I'd be looking at hotels, for whatever potential road playoff games we'd be planning for. That was it was more stressful than I thought it was going to be. Watching 2 games at once down the stretch there.
Well, we look forward to reading that on allphly.com, and we will see you on the regular PHLY Eagles show tomorrow at 2:00. EJ, thank you so much.
See you.
All right, guys. Talk soon.